The first person at my office to tell me I was becoming a problem was a guy who had once asked me to help him move a couch. He stood beside my desk at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning holding a paper coffee cup in both hands and said, "Hey man, I don't know if this is my place, but you should probably talk to Karen before she talks to you." I looked up from a spreadsheet and laughed because I genuinely thought he was joking. "About what?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder toward the glass conference room, lowered his voice, and said, "The stuff people are saying about you." That was the moment I realized something had gone very wrong because I had no idea what he was talking about. 3 weeks earlier, I had still believed my life was merely going through a rough patch. My girlfriend had broken up with me. My best friend, Ryan Mercer, had somehow become strangely distant. A couple of people we'd known for years had stopped returning texts. It hurt, but breakups happen. Friendships change. People get busy. I had been telling myself that for weeks. What I hadn't understood was that while I was trying to figure out why the people closest to me seemed to be drifting away, someone had been quietly explaining my disappearance to them. And apparently the explanation was that I was unstable, not heartbroken, not confused, unstable. I stared at the guy standing beside my desk and said, "What stuff?" He immediately looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't have said anything. "You already did." He rubbed the cardboard sleeve around his coffee. "Karen thinks you're having a hard time handling pressure. That's all I know." "Why would Karen think that?" He didn't answer. He just gave me the kind of sympathetic look people give someone who has already been discussed in rooms they weren't invited into. Then he walked away. I sat there for several seconds with my hands still on the keyboard. I worked as a project manager for a regional commercial construction company outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous. No corner office. No six-figure executive package. I coordinated schedules, subcontractors, budgets, change orders, inspections, material deliveries, and the endless stream of little disasters that happen when 12 companies are trying to build one thing on a deadline. I had been with the company for almost 6 years, and I had worked hard enough that people generally trusted me with complicated jobs. I wasn't perfect. I could be stubborn. I hated confrontation until I'd avoided it for so long that the eventual confrontation became worse. I overthought things. I sometimes took criticism personally even when I knew better, but I had never been accused of being unstable. My performance reviews were solid. My project closeout numbers were good. I had been on track for a senior project manager position by the following year. That morning, none of that seemed to matter. I looked across the office toward Karen's glass-walled conference room. Karen Holt was my department director, and she had been my boss for nearly 4 years. If she believed I couldn't handle pressure, I needed to know why. I finished the spreadsheet, saved everything twice, and went to her door. She looked up. "Come in." I sat down. She closed the document on her screen. "What's going on?" she asked. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." She leaned back. "I'm not sure what you mean. Someone just told me people are saying I'm having problems handling pressure." Her expression changed so slightly that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching carefully. "Who told you that?" I'd rather not say. "Then I'm not sure how you expect me to address it." "Okay, then I'll ask you directly. Do you think I'm having a problem handling pressure?" She paused. "I think you've had a difficult month." "That's not what I asked." She folded her hands. "You've missed 2 internal deadlines. By a day. You've been unusually defensive in meetings because people keep asking me the same questions, and you've had some communication issues. With who?" Another pause. "That's not really the point." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Karen, if there's a legitimate performance problem, tell me what it is. I can fix a performance problem. I can't fix a rumor if nobody will tell me what the rumor says." She looked at me for a long moment. "There have been concerns raised about your judgment recently." "By whom?" "I can't discuss confidential personnel conversations." "Is this a formal warning?" "Not at this point." "Then what is it?" She sighed. "A conversation." I left her office with nothing except a vague warning and a feeling I couldn't explain. At the time, I thought the obvious answer was that my breakup had affected my work. I had been sleeping badly. I had missed a couple of emails. I had snapped at a subcontractor during a scheduling call, though I'd apologized the same afternoon. None of that was good, but none of it explained the sudden shift in how people were looking at me. The worst part was that I had no idea who could have caused it. I didn't know then that the answer had been sitting in my life for years. His name was Ryan. Ryan Mercer and I met when I was 13 because our mothers volunteered at the same community center and decided 2 bored teenagers should probably entertain each other instead of wandering around the parking lot. We hated each other for about 3 hours. Then he showed me how to bypass the parental controls on the old family computer, and I decided he was probably worth keeping around. We grew up 3 streets apart. We played baseball badly, spent entire summers riding bikes, got our driver's licenses together, worked terrible teenage jobs, went to different colleges, and somehow stayed close. There were years when I saw him more often than I saw my own cousins. When my father lost his job during the recession, Ryan was the person who showed up with pizza and didn't ask questions. When Ryan's mother got sick, I drove him to appointments because he couldn't keep his work schedule and hers straight. We had been through deaths, breakups, bad apartments, terrible jobs, birthdays, weddings, Christmases, and every stupid phase 2 young men go through before realizing adulthood is mostly paying bills and figuring out what to cook. Ryan was the kind of person everyone liked. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave 20 minutes later with 3 new friends. He remembered birthdays. He called people's mothers by their first names. He could make a nervous person laugh without making them feel like the joke was on them. I was quieter. Ryan filled silence. I trusted him partly because he had earned it, and partly because I had never considered the possibility that I needed to protect myself from him. That distinction would eventually matter more than anything else. I met Emily Carter when I was 26. She worked in marketing for a medical supply company downtown. We met at a friend's barbecue, where she spent most of the afternoon arguing with Ryan about whether Ohio State football was overrated. Ryan loved her immediately. Not romantically. At least that's what I thought. He told me afterward, "Dude, she's perfect for you. Don't screw this up." I laughed. "Thanks, Dad. I'm serious. She's smart, I noticed. And she doesn't laugh at your terrible jokes. That's because she has standards." He grinned. "Exactly." Emily and I dated for almost 3 years. She wasn't perfect, but neither was I. She was ambitious, independent, sometimes impatient, and terrible at admitting when she was wrong. She loved weekend trips, old bookstores, and trying restaurants neither of us could pronounce. She hated camping. I loved it. She liked planning everything 6 weeks ahead. I often remembered appointments the night before. Somehow, we worked. Ryan became part of the relationship because Ryan was already part of my life. He came to dinners. He came on a trip to Nashville. He spent Thanksgiving at my mother's house when his own family was traveling. He knew Emily's coffee order. Emily knew which of Ryan's jokes meant he was actually upset. None of that seemed strange. That's what happens when 2 people have been friends for 16 years. Their lives overlapped. Looking back, there were moments I should have noticed. I remember one Saturday in March when Emily and I were supposed to meet Ryan and his girlfriend Jenna for dinner. Jenna canceled because she had a migraine. Ryan showed up anyway. He spent most of the evening talking to Emily about a marketing campaign she'd been working on. I barely noticed because Ryan had always been interested in whatever people around him were doing. Another time, Emily mentioned a story I'd only told Ryan. I asked her how she knew. She shrugged and said Ryan must have mentioned it. That explanation made sense. There were dozens of conversations between the 3 of us. Another time, Ryan knew I had been frustrated about a promotion before I had told him. I assumed Emily had told him. Later, when Emily and I argued about moving in together, Ryan somehow knew the exact details of the argument. I thought Emily had vented to him. At the time, none of these things felt like evidence. They felt like the normal leakage that happens when 3 people spend a lot of time together. The first genuinely strange thing happened in April. Emily and I were at my apartment when she got a text and turned her phone face down. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah." "Who was it?" She looked at me. "Why?" "No reason." She looked at me. "Why?" "No reason." She smiled, but it was a little too quick. "Just Jenna." I didn't think anything of it until the following weekend, when Ryan made an offhand comment about a meeting Emily had supposedly had with a client on Friday. I looked at him. "How'd you know about that?" He blinked. "Know what? The client meeting. Emily mentioned it." "Emily mentioned it. When?" Hugh laughed. "I don't know, man. You think I keep a spreadsheet?" We moved on. A week later, Emily told me she was working late. Ryan texted me around 9 and asked if I wanted to get a beer. I said no. He replied, "Probably for the best. You look exhausted lately." I hadn't told him I was exhausted. Again, I ignored it. Then came the night everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no hotel room, no open laptop with incriminating messages, no cinematic confrontation. I discovered it because Emily accidentally sent me a photo that she hadn't intended to send me. She was at a restaurant downtown. The message said, "Can you send me the reservation details? I think we're going to be late." Attached was a picture of the table, 2 glasses of wine, 2 plates, Ryan's watch visible at the bottom edge of the frame. I stared at it for almost a minute before I understood what I was looking at. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I called Ryan. He answered on the second ring. "What's up?" His voice was normal, completely normal. "Where are you?" Silence. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but I knew him well enough to hear it. "Home," he said. "You sure?" Yeah. I sent him the picture. He stopped talking. Then he said, "Where'd you get that?" I closed my eyes. "Emily sent it to me. I can explain." Those 4 words destroyed 16 years of friendship faster than any confession could have. Not because he said he was sorry. Not because he denied it. Because he said he could explain. I hung up. Emily called 30 seconds later. I didn't answer. She called again, then again. I sat on my couch staring at the photograph. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept looking at Ryan's watch and thinking about all the places that watch had been with me. Baseball games, weddings, my father's funeral, my 21st birthday, a road trip to Chicago, a hospital waiting room. I had seen that watch hundreds of times. I had never imagined it would become the object that proved my best friend had been sleeping with my girlfriend. Emily eventually came to my apartment. She stood outside my door crying. I let her in because I wanted answers, not because I wanted her back. She sat at the edge of the couch and kept saying she was sorry. I asked how long. She said 3 months. I asked again. She said maybe 4. Then, after I told her I already knew she'd been lying, she admitted it had been longer. 6 months. Maybe 7. I asked where it started. She said it was emotional first. She said they talked. She said Ryan understood things she felt I didn't. That sentence hurt more than the affair itself. I asked what she meant. She couldn't explain it. Then I asked whether Ryan had been talking about me. She went quiet. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Nothing, Emily." She looked down. "He said you were struggling." "With what?" "Work, stress-ins, everything." I stared at her. "When did he start saying that?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Before or after you started sleeping with him?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The breakup was ugly but quiet. I didn't tell our entire friend group immediately. I didn't post anything. I didn't call Ryan's parents. I didn't send screenshots to everyone. I wanted distance. I blocked Emily after she moved her things out. I blocked Ryan too. For 2 weeks, I barely left my apartment except for work. And that's when the strange workplace incidents started getting worse. The first was the missed deadline Karen mentioned. The second was a client complaining that I had sounded erratic during a call. I knew exactly what I had said. I had been firm, maybe too firm, but erratic. Then a coworker named Mark stopped by my desk and said, "Hey, I heard you were going through some stuff." I asked what he meant. He looked embarrassed. "Nothing bad. That's not an answer." He shrugged. "Just personal stuff." "What personal stuff?" "I don't know." He walked away. A few days later, another coworker casually mentioned that I'd supposedly gotten into a fight with someone at a bar. That was completely false. I hadn't been to a bar in weeks. Then someone mentioned that I'd been having trouble keeping my emotions under control. That phrase stuck with me because it sounded rehearsed, like people had heard the same sentence from somewhere. I started writing things down, dates, names, comments, nothing dramatic, just facts. August 4, Mark mentions personal issues. August 7, client says I sounded erratic. August 9, Karen questions judgment. August 11, coworker mentions bar incident. August 13, someone says people are concerned. I didn't know what I was building yet. I only knew that the pattern made no sense. On August 15, I got an email from Karen asking me to meet her privately. She didn't smile when I entered. "We need to discuss your role on the Franklin project." I sat down. "What happened?" "The client has requested another project manager." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "They've expressed concerns about communication." "Which concerns?" "I can't give you every detail." "I know, but I need to understand." "Matt, this isn't a debate. I'm not to Matt. I'm off tonight. I'm masking what I supposedly did." She folded her hands. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. That's not a project issue. It's becoming one." "Did the client actually say they wanted me removed?" She paused. "They expressed concerns." "That's not what I asked. I think you need to step back for a little while." "Are you removing me?" "Temporarily." "For how long?" She looked away. "We haven't decided." That was the first moment I realized I might actually lose my job. I went home that night and opened my laptop. I pulled up every project email I still had access to. Everything looked normal. No obvious mistakes. No angry client emails, no complaints. I started comparing dates. The client complaint had supposedly happened on August 6th. On August 5, I received a perfectly normal email from the client saying, "Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you staying on top of this." On August 7, the same client suddenly wanted me removed. I stared at the two messages side by side. Then I remembered something Mark had said. "I heard you were going through some stuff." Not from me, not from Karen, from somewhere else. I opened my phone and searched my messages for the last 6 months. I found one conversation that made my hands go cold. It was with Ryan. 3 weeks before Emily and I broke up, he had texted me, "If things ever get really bad with Emily, don't make any big decisions while you're emotional. You got a tendency to spiral." I had laughed when I received it. I had told him I was fine. Now I read it again. The date was 6 weeks before the affair came out. 6 weeks before I knew anything was wrong. Ryan had already been describing me as unstable. I kept scrolling. There were other messages. "Don't let work stress get to you. You need to sleep more. You're not yourself lately. Promise me you'll talk to someone if you're struggling." At the time, I thought those were messages from my best friend checking on me. Now they look different. They look like someone creating a record. I didn't know what the record was for. I didn't know who it was meant for. But for the first time, I stopped asking whether Ryan had betrayed me romantically and started asking a much uglier question. What if the affair wasn't the beginning of this? My phone was still in my hand when a notification appeared from an old email account I rarely used. It was a forwarded message from a former coworker who had left the company months earlier. The subject line was simply, "You should probably see this." I opened it and the first sentence made me sit up straight. "I don't know if this helps, but Ryan has been asking people about your work for months." I read that sentence 3 times before I scrolled down. The email was from Daniel Price, a former assistant project manager who had worked in our department for about 18 months before leaving for a contractor in Indianapolis. I hadn't spoken to him since his last day. The message continued. "I don't know if you remember, but around May, Ryan started asking me questions about how you handled projects, whether you'd ever gotten written up, and whether you had problems with clients." I thought it was weird because he's not in your company, but I figured maybe you were friends and he was worried about you. Then after everything happened with Emily, I realized I probably should have told you. I stared at the screen until my eyes started burning. May. Emily and I had broken up in August. The affair had supposedly started around February or March. Ryan had been asking about my professional reputation months before I knew anything was wrong. I kept reading. Daniel had attached 2 screenshots from an old text conversation. The first showed Ryan asking, "Has Matt ever had a problem with anger at work?" Daniel replied, "Not that I know of." "Why?" Ryan answered, "Just wondering. He's under a lot of pressure lately." The second exchange was from a few weeks later. Ryan had asked whether I'd ever been put on a performance plan. Daniel replied that he didn't think so. Ryan said, "Good. I just worry he's going to burn out." I sat back from the laptop. There was nothing criminal in those messages, nothing explosive. If I had shown them to someone and said, "Look, my former best friend asked a coworker whether I was stressed," they might have shrugged. But combined with everything else, they changed the shape of the story. Ryan hadn't suddenly started talking about me after the affair. He'd been collecting information before the affair became public. I called Daniel. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hey man, where did you get these?" "Those are my texts." "Why didn't you tell me before?" He exhaled. "Honestly? Because I didn't think it mattered." "When did you start thinking it mattered?" "When I heard you were having problems at work." I closed my eyes. "Who told you?" "Nobody directly. It was floating around." "What was floating around?" "What was floating around?" "That you were having trouble. That you become unpredictable." "Who said that?" "I don't know." "Daniel? I'm serious. I heard it from 2 different people, but neither of them claimed to know where it started." I looked at the screenshots again. "Why did you send this now?" There was a pause. "Because I saw Ryan last weekend." "Where?" "At a mutual friend's birthday. And he asked me whether I'd heard from you." "What did you say?" "I said no." "Then what?" Daniel hesitated. He said, "Probably better that way. Matt's going through something." I felt my jaw tighten. Did he say anything else? No. But the whole thing felt wrong. I thanked him and hung up. For the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt something else. Not anger exactly. Anger was too simple. This was the feeling you get when a locked door suddenly opens and you realize there is a hallway behind it that you never knew existed. I spent the next 3 hours reconstructing dates. I pulled up old calendars. I checked emails. I looked at photos. I went through conversations with Emily and Ryan, not because I wanted to relive anything, but because I needed to know what had been happening around the dates Daniel mentioned. In May, Ryan had asked me whether I was happy at my company. In June, he had asked how much longer I expected to stay in my current role. In July, he told me I seemed burned out. In August, after Emily and I split, he'd sent me a message saying, "You need to be careful right now. People at work are going to notice you're not yourself." At the time, I'd assumed he was being protective. Now it looked like a warning from the person creating the problem. I opened the message again. "People at work are going to notice. Why would they?" I told almost nobody at work about the breakup. My manager knew because I had taken 2 days off. One coworker knew because I made the mistake of telling him over lunch. That was it. Yet, people were suddenly discussing my personal life. I called my coworker Mark. He answered with a tired, "What's up? Can I ask you something?" "Sure." When he said people knew I was going through stuff, "Who did you hear it from?" He went quiet. "Why?" "Because I need to understand something. I don't want to get involved." "You're already involved." Another pause. It came up in the break room. "Who said it?" "I don't remember." "You do." "Matt, I really don't want. Please." He sighed. "I think it was Greg." Greg was another project manager, older than me, generally decent, and absolutely not someone I considered a close friend. "What did Greg say?" "Something about you having a rough breakup and not handling it well." "Did Greg say where he heard that?" "No." "Did you ever hear Ryan talk about me?" "Ryan?" "Yeah." Mark hesitated. "A little." "What did he say?" "He asked me once whether you were okay." "When?" "A couple months ago." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell him?" "What did you tell him? That you seemed fine." "Anything else?" "No." I thanked him. Then I called Greg. He didn't answer. I left a message. 20 minutes later, he called back. "What's going on? Did you tell people I was unstable?" "What?" "Did you tell people I was having trouble at work because of my breakup?" "No." "Did you hear that from someone?" He was silent. "Greg." Ryan mentioned it. My hand tightened around the phone. "When?" "I don't remember exactly." "Try." "Late July, maybe. We were at that charity thing downtown." "What did he say?" "He said you weren't doing well, that you were getting emotional and taking things personally at work." I sat down. "Did you believe him?" "At the time, yeah." That answer hurt more than I expected. "Why?" "Because he's your best friend." I figured he'd know. There it was, the weapon Ryan had spent 16 years building. His credibility. People trusted him because I trusted him. If I said Ryan was lying, they naturally asked why he would lie. I had no answer. Not yet. I spent the next week doing something I had never done before. I stopped defending myself. When someone hinted at rumors, I asked exactly what they'd heard. When someone repeated something vague, I asked where it came from. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't mention Emily unless someone brought her up. I simply kept records. Date, time, person, exact words, source if known. I created a folder on my personal computer and called it Timeline. I saved copies of emails I was legally entitled to keep, screenshots of messages sent to me, notes from conversations, and documents related to my work performance. I wasn't trying to build a revenge file, at least that's what I told myself. I was trying to figure out whether I was imagining a pattern. The evidence kept saying I wasn't. On Friday afternoon, Karen called me into her office again. This time, there was someone from HR sitting beside her. His name was Paul Reynolds. I'd met him twice before. He closed the door. "Matt, we're going to discuss your current assignment." "Okay." Paul looked at the file in front of him. "There have been continuing concerns regarding your ability to manage conflict appropriately." That was the accusation, not instability, not incompetence. Conflict management. It sounded professional enough to be dangerous. "What conflict?" I asked. "Several interactions have been described as confrontational." "By whom?" "We can't discuss individual reports." "Then how am I supposed to respond?" Paul said, "We're not asking you to respond. We're informing you that the company is placing you on administrative leave pending review." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain couldn't find another reaction. "Administrative leave?" Karen nodded. "Effective today. Paid for now." "How long?" "We don't know." "How long?" "We don't know." "And the Franklin project?" "We've reassigned it." "To who?" Nobody answered. "To two." "Who?" Nobody answered. I knew before they did. Ryan didn't work for my company, but he had connections in the local construction community. He sold commercial insurance for a large regional brokerage. I'd introduced him to several contractors over the years. He attended networking events. He knew people. I had always been proud of how good he was at building relationships. I didn't realize how useful those relationships would become. I walked out of the office carrying a cardboard box with a laptop charger, 2 notebooks, and a coffee mug my mother had given me. People tried not to look at me. That's one of the strangest parts of being accused of something without knowing the accusation. Everyone else seems to know the story except you. I drove home and parked outside my apartment for 20 minutes without getting out. My phone buzzed. It was Ryan. I almost deleted the message without reading it. Instead, I opened it. Heard things got rough at work. You okay? I stared at those words until they stopped looking like English. He knew. Of course he knew. I didn't answer. Another message arrived. Seriously, man, don't make this worse by reacting emotionally. I put the phone face down. That night, I drank 1 beer, not because I wanted to get drunk, but because I needed something cold in my hand while I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the timeline and added the messages. Then I added a new line. August 22nd. Ryan knew about administrative leave within hours. I didn't know how. I couldn't prove he had caused it, but I knew he knew. The next morning, Emily called. I almost didn't answer. What? I said. Can we talk? About what? Everything. There's nothing left to talk about. There is. Emily, you slept with Ryan. I know. You lied to me. I know. You lied to me. I know. What exactly do you want from me? She started crying. I don't know. Then don't call me. Matt, please. Matt made mistakes. I made mistakes. She was silent. You don't accidentally have an affair for 6 months. I know. So what do you want? She took a breath. I want to tell you something. I didn't say anything. Ryan talked about you constantly. My chest tightened. What do you mean? Before we were together. Before. Yes. What did he say? That you were unhappy. That you were overwhelmed. That you didn't know what you wanted. Did he tell you I was unstable? Silence. Emily. Sometimes. I stood up from the table. Sometimes. He said you had a temper. I don't have a temper. You get frustrated. That's not the same thing. I know. Did he tell you I was having problems at work? Yes. When? When? Before we slept together. I closed my eyes. There it was. The first major piece of the timeline falling into place. How long before? I don't know. Weeks. What did he say? That people were noticing, that you were under pressure. Did you believe him? At first. And later? She started crying again. Later, I realized he was saying the same things to other people. I sat down. What do you mean? He told Jenna that you were difficult. Jenna told you that? No. I saw a message once. Whose message? Whose message? Ryan's. Where? On his phone. Why were you looking at his phone? She didn't answer. Emily. Because I was already suspicious of him. That stopped me. What? After we started seeing each other, he became controlling. Controlling how? He'd ask who I'd talk to. He'd ask where I was. He didn't like when I talked to you. That's ironic. I know. Why are you telling me this now? Because I think he lied to both of us. I stared at the wall. About what? About you. She hesitated. He told me you were going to leave me. I laughed once. I wasn't. I know that now. What made you believe him? He had examples. What made you believe him? He had examples. What examples? Things you'd told him. I felt sick. My private conversations? Yes. Things I told him about us? Yes. And he used them against me. Not exactly. He framed them differently. How? She said, he told me you had been asking him whether you should stay with me. I remembered that conversation. I had asked Ryan whether he thought Emily and I were ready to move in together. I'd been scared. I trusted him. Apparently, he had turned uncertainty into evidence that I didn't love her. I asked Emily if she had anything else. She said, there's something I never told you. What? The first time we kissed, Ryan said you already knew we were having problems. I didn't. I know. Why would he say that? I don't know. Why would he say that? I don't know. Did you believe him? At the time, yes. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I just said, I hope you understand that doesn't make what you did okay. I know. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again, she whispered. I know. We hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand. The strange thing was that I no longer felt the same kind of anger toward her. What she'd done was still unforgivable to me, but she was no longer the center of the story. Ryan was. The next person I called was Jenna. She didn't answer. I didn't leave a message. I wasn't going to chase people. If she wanted to talk, she could. 3 days later, she called. Matt? Hey, Emily told you? Some of it. Jenna sighed. I should have called you earlier. Why didn't you? Because I didn't know what was true. What do you know now? She was quiet for a while. Ryan has been telling people things about you for months. I know. No, I don't think you do. Then tell me. He told me you were unstable before you and Emily broke up. When? Spring. What exactly did he say? That you were under a lot of pressure and that he was worried you were going to blow up your career. I wrote the date down. Why would he tell you that? Because I asked why he was spending so much time with Emily. My pen stopped. What did he say? He said you were neglecting her. And you believed him. I did. Why? Because he made it sound like he was protecting you. I leaned back. What happened between you two? We broke up. Because of Emily? Partly? Did Ryan cheat on you? She didn't answer. Jenna? I found messages. My heart started beating faster. From Emily? No. From other women. I closed my eyes. What? Not necessarily physical? Flirting. DMs. Stuff like that. When? Months before we broke up. I didn't know what to say. The man I had known since 13 suddenly seemed like someone I'd never met. But I still didn't know whether any of this proved he was sabotaging my career. It proved he lied. It proved he manipulated people. It proved he had been talking about me. It didn't prove he had contacted my employer. I needed that connection, and I wasn't going to manufacture it. The opportunity came from someone I didn't expect. Her name was Melissa Grant, and she worked in client relations for the company that handled one of our largest accounts. I knew her professionally, but not personally. She called me on a Wednesday evening. Matt, I hope this isn't inappropriate. What's up? I heard you're on leave. Yeah, I heard you're on leave. Yeah, I wanted to ask you something. Okay, did you send an email to one of our executives last month? No. Did you call him? No. Did you have a conversation with him about your project? Not that I remember. That's what I thought. I sat up. Why? Because someone told him you were angry about the contract. Who? I can't say. Melissa. I shouldn't even be calling you. Then why are you? She hesitated. Because I don't think the story makes sense. What story? That you were becoming difficult to work with. My pulse increased. What did they tell him? That you'd become confrontational with clients and that you were frustrated enough to make reckless decisions. I wrote the words down. Who told him? A third party. Who? Someone who knew you personally. I stopped writing. Did they give a name? No. Did they give any details that only someone close to me would know? Yes. What details? Your breakup. I closed my eyes. Anything else? Something about your father's health a few years ago. I couldn't speak for a moment. Very few people knew about that. Ryan did. Emily did. My mother did. A handful of close friends. Did they say my name? Yes. Did they say Ryan's? No. Okay. She lowered her voice. Matt, I don't know what's happening, but I think you should talk to an attorney before you confront anybody. That sentence stayed with me. Not because I wanted to sue someone. I didn't. But because it was the first time an outside person had confirmed that the rumor wasn't confined to my office. It had reached a client. That meant someone was actively carrying the story from one part of my life into another. I thanked Melissa and ended the call. Then I opened my timeline. The entries now covered nearly 5 months. May, Ryan asked former coworker about my work history. June, Ryan asks about my stress. July, Ryan tells Greg I'm emotionally unstable. August, breakup becomes known. August, breakup becomes known. August, workplace rumors intensify. August, client questions my judgment. August, administrative leave. I stared at the sequence. Then I noticed something I had missed. In May, Ryan had asked Daniel whether I'd ever been placed on a performance plan. In June, he had asked about my relationship with clients. In July, he had started describing me as emotionally unstable. In August, after the affair became known, my employer suddenly began hearing the same language. The affair wasn't causing the professional sabotage. The professional sabotage was already underway. The affair had simply made me notice it. I called Daniel again. I need a favor. What? Do you still have the full text thread with Ryan? Yeah. Can you send me the complete thing? Not just screenshots. Why? Because I need the dates. He hesitated. Sure. 10 minutes later, the conversation arrived. I read every message. Most were harmless. Some were about work. Some were about work. Some were about me. Then I found one from June 18. Ryan had written, if Matt starts acting weird at work, don't be surprised. He's been under a lot of pressure. Daniel replied, what makes you think that? Ryan answered, I know him better than anybody. I stared at that line. I know him better than anybody. That was the foundation of everything. Ryan knew my habits. He knew what I worried about. He knew what embarrassed me. He knew that I hated being called unreliable. He knew I'd rather work twice as hard than admit I needed help. He knew I'd react defensively if someone questioned my competence. And he knew exactly how much people trusted his judgment. He didn't need to invent a completely new version of me. He only needed to take pieces of the real me, remove the context, and arrange them into a story. That was when I finally understood why the rumors were so effective. They weren't random lies, they were carefully edited truths. I had missed deadlines. 2. I had lost my temper once. I had argued with a subcontractor. I had been stressed. I had taken time off after my breakup. All of those things were real. Ryan had simply built a different story around them. The next morning, Karen called. "We need to discuss your employment status." I knew what was coming. "Am I being terminated?" "Yes." The word landed quietly. "Effective today." I swallowed. "Is there documentation?" "There will be a separation agreement." What was the final reason? Loss of confidence in your ability to manage client relationships. I almost laughed again. Did the client say that? "We received feedback." "From whom?" "Matt, I can't keep going in circles." "No, you're right." I stood. "I just want my personal belongings." She looked at me with something close to sympathy. "I'll have someone bring them down." I walked out carrying a box heavier than the one I'd carried 2 weeks earlier. This time, people actually looked at me. I didn't look back. Losing the job hurt differently than losing Emily. Emily was personal. The job was proof that I built something. 6 years of early mornings, late calls, missed dinners, angry subcontractors, budget meetings, and weekends spent fixing problems that weren't technically mine, gone because someone had convinced people I couldn't handle pressure. I spent the next month applying for jobs. The first few interviews went well until references came up. Then things got strange. One recruiter said the hiring manager had concerns. Another told me they had decided to move forward with someone else after speaking to my former employer. I didn't know what was being said. I didn't know what I could legally challenge. I didn't even know whether I should. My savings started shrinking. I canceled a planned vacation. I sold a second television I'd barely used. I stopped ordering takeout. I moved money around and started calculating how long I could pay rent if nothing changed. Meanwhile, Ryan seemed to be doing better than ever. I heard through mutual friends that he was dating someone. Then I heard it was Emily. Then I saw a photo online of Ryan at a rooftop bar with people I'd known for years. Emily was beside him. I wasn't tagged. Nobody mentioned me. That photograph hurt, but not because I wanted Emily back. It hurt because it looked like they had stepped into the life I'd built and simply continued without me. Then came the message that changed everything. It was from Jenna. She wrote, "I found something. I don't know if you want it." I replied, "What is it?" Her response came 30 seconds later, a screenshot Ryan sent me months ago. I saved it because I thought it was weird. She attached an image. I opened it. It was a screenshot of a private conversation between me and Ryan. The conversation was from the previous January. I had told him about a mistake I'd made at work. I had accidentally approved a material order too early and cost the project several $1,000s in expedited shipping. I had been ashamed of it. Ryan had told me not to worry. The screenshot showed my message. "I don't want anyone at work knowing how badly I screwed this up." Underneath was Ryan's response, "Nobody's going to know, I promise." I stared at the image. Jenna had written, "He sent this to me in April. He said he was trying to show me how badly you were doing mentally." My hands went numb. April, before the rumors, before the affair came out, before my first workplace warning. He had taken a private conversation that I believed was protected by friendship and shown it to someone else as evidence that I was unstable. I looked at the date on the screenshot again, January 14. Then I looked at the date of Daniel's first message from Ryan, May 2. Then the dates of the rumors. Then the breakup. Then the job loss. The timeline wasn't just a collection of bad events anymore. It was a sequence. And somewhere inside that sequence was the thing I had been missing. Ryan hadn't decided to destroy my reputation because I discovered the affair. He had been preparing people to believe the worst about me long before I knew there was anything to discover. I called Jenna immediately. She answered, "You saw it. Yes, I'm sorry." "Why did he send that to you?" "He said he was worried about you." "What else did he send?" Silence. "Jenna, there were more." My heart started pounding. "How many?" "I don't know." "A lot." "Do you still have them?" "Some." "Can you send me everything you still have?" "I'll look." Don't send me anything you shouldn't have. I know. I mean it. I know, Matt. She paused. There's one more thing. What? He told me you would never investigate him. I didn't move. When? A few months ago. What exactly did he say? Jenna took a breath. He said, Matt trusts me too much. Even if something looks wrong, he'll find a reason to explain it away. I looked at the timeline on my screen. Then I looked at the empty apartment around me. For the first time since I lost everything, I understood the one advantage I still had. Ryan had spent years studying the version of me he thought he controlled. He had assumed I would react like the person he had carefully convinced everyone I was. Angry, defensive, emotional, predictable. He had made one mistake. He had forgotten that I had spent 6 years managing construction projects where the truth was almost never found by arguing about who was right. It was found by checking the dates, the documents, the sequence of events, and the people who had actually been there. I opened a new document beneath the old timeline. At the top, I typed 3 words, what I can prove. Then I started with January 14. Then I started with January 14. I didn't write Ryan betrayed me. I didn't write Ryan destroyed my life. I wrote facts. January 14, I told Ryan about the material order mistake at work. He said he wouldn't tell anyone. April, Ryan sent a screenshot of that private conversation to Jenna and described it as evidence that I was mentally struggling. May 2nd, Ryan asked Daniel whether I'd ever been disciplined at work. June 18, Ryan told Daniel that if I started acting strangely at work, it shouldn't surprise him because I'd been under pressure. July, Ryan told Greg I was emotionally unstable and taking things personally. August, my relationship ended. August, workplace rumors began. August, a client suddenly questioned my judgment. August, I was placed on leave. August, I was terminated. I stared at the list for a long time. There were gaps, and those gaps mattered. I couldn't assume what happened inside them. I couldn't turn suspicion into fact just because the pattern was horrifying. If I was going to do anything with what I had, I needed to be more disciplined than Ryan had been. I needed to separate what I knew from what I suspected. So I made 3 columns: confirmed, reported, unknown. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was doing paperwork on my own life, but it gave me something I hadn't had since the day Emily sent me that photograph. Control? I put January 14 in confirmed because I had the original conversation. I put April in confirmed because Jenna had the screenshot and could tell me when Ryan sent it. I put May and June in confirmed because Daniel had the complete text thread. I put July in reported because Greg remembered the conversation but didn't have a recording. I put the client's issue in confirmed because Melissa had contacted me and described what she'd been told, but I didn't yet know who had delivered the information. The identity of that person went under unknown. I kept adding names. Daniel, Jenna, Greg, Melissa, Karen, Paul, Emily, Ryan, me. It was strange seeing all those names together. Some were people I'd known for years. Some were people I'd barely known for years. Some were people I'd barely known. And then there was Ryan, sitting in the middle of all of it like a hub connecting things that shouldn't have been connected. The next morning, I called an employment attorney. Not because I wanted a lawsuit. I wanted someone to tell me where the boundaries were. Her name was Susan Alvarez, and a former co-worker had recommended her. She listened for almost an hour without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you have evidence that your former friend contacted your employer directly? Not yet. Do you have evidence that someone repeated false personal information about you to your employer? I have evidence that personal information was repeated. I don't yet know exactly who repeated it. That's important. Is what I'm doing okay? Documenting your own experiences and preserving communications you lawfully received isn't the same thing as spying on someone. But don't access accounts that aren't yours. Don't impersonate anyone. Don't secretly record conversations where doing so would violate the law. And don't contact your former employer demanding they admit something before you know what happened. I wasn't planning to. She gave a small smile. Good, because your strongest position right now is that you're trying to establish facts, not manufacture a revenge story. The word revenge made me uncomfortable. I'm not trying to hurt him. Maybe not. She looked at her notes. But you're angry. Yes, that's normal. Just don't let anger decide what you do with evidence. I left her office with no magical solution, no promise that I would get my job back, and no certainty that anything I discovered would be enough to prove intentional sabotage. But I had something better than certainty. I had a method. I started calling people one at a time. I didn't tell them what I thought. I asked what they remembered. I learned quickly that people remembered conversations differently depending on what they thought mattered. Greg remembered the phrase emotionally unstable because it had bothered him. Daniel remembered Ryan asking about my work because it had seemed strange. Melissa remembered the client because the client had specifically asked whether I'd been under stress. Jenna remembered the screenshot because Ryan had sent it to her during an argument about me. Nobody had the whole picture. That's what made the situation believable. Ryan hadn't gone around announcing, "I'm destroying Matt's reputation." He had given each person one small piece of a larger story. To one person, I was stressed. To another, I was difficult. To another, I was angry. To another, I was angry. To another, I was making mistakes. To Emily, I was emotionally unavailable. To Jenna, I was unstable. Each individual statement was just plausible enough to survive scrutiny. Together, they created a person who didn't exist, a version of me that could explain almost anything. I also began looking at myself more honestly, which was uncomfortable. Some of what Ryan said had been built around real weaknesses. I did avoid difficult conversations. I did become defensive when I felt incompetent. I did obsess over mistakes. I did have a bad habit of working until I was exhausted and then pretending I was fine. The difference was that those things made me human. Ryan had turned them into a diagnosis. That distinction became important later. 2 weeks after my termination, I got an email from a recruiter named Allison. She had contacted me about a project management position with a commercial development company in Cincinnati. The salary was slightly lower than my previous job, but the position had a better long-term path. We scheduled an interview. I expected the same thing to happen. It didn't. The hiring manager, Tom, seemed interested. He asked about my previous projects. We talked for almost an hour. Then he said, "Can I ask you something uncomfortable?" I knew immediately. Sure. There were some concerns raised about your last position. I kept my face neutral. What kind? Conflict management. I took a breath. What did you hear? That you had become difficult with clients. Was that from my former employer? Not directly. Then from whom? He hesitated. A professional contact. Did they identify themselves? No. Did they know me personally? They said they did. There it was again. I asked, did they mention a name? Tom shook his head. No. Did they provide examples? A couple. Were those examples accurate? He frowned. That's what we're trying to determine. I reached into my folder and pulled out printed performance reviews from the previous 2 years. Then I'd like you to look at these before making a decision. He looked through them. No formal disciplinary action. Strong client feedback. Completed projects. Positive evaluations. Not perfect, but nowhere close to the person he'd been told about. Tom leaned back. Why didn't your former company tell us this? I don't know. Were you fired? Yes. For cause. They said they lost confidence in me. He nodded slowly. That's difficult. It is. I'll be honest. This doesn't make the concern disappear. I understand. But it makes me question where it came from. That sentence was the first crack I'd seen in the story outside my own head. I didn't get the job immediately, but Tom called 3 days later and asked for 2 references. I gave him Daniel's name even though Daniel no longer worked there, and another former supervisor who had left the company before my termination. The job offer came a week later. It wasn't the victory I wanted. It wasn't even the career I had planned. But it was a door. I took it. My first day was strange. I arrived early, sat in a small office with a second-hand desk, and started learning their systems. Nobody knew my history. Nobody cared about Emily. Nobody knew Ryan. For the first time in months, I was just a project manager again. I worked hard. I kept every promise. I documented every decision. I didn't over-explain myself. I didn't talk about the rumors. I didn't tell people that I thought my old friend had sabotaged me. I simply did the job. 6 weeks in, Tom called me into his office. You settling in? Yeah. Good. He smiled. I got some interesting feedback from your old clients. I froze. What kind? Positive. He laughed. Apparently you're not nearly as difficult as someone suggested. I smiled. I guess that's good. He studied me for a second. Did someone try to hurt your career? I didn't answer. He didn't press. Whatever happened, he said, you're doing well here. I thanked him. That night, I updated my timeline. New job started. Positive performance. Former client feedback positive. I didn't add anything else. I wanted the record to stay clean. Around the same time, Emily contacted me again. I almost ignored it, but her message said, I think you need to know something about Ryan. I called her. What now? He knows you're talking to people. How? I don't know. What did he say? He asked whether you'd contacted Jenna. My stomach tightened. Why would he ask that? Because Jenna told him she wasn't comfortable talking to him anymore. When? Last week. Did he mention me? Yes. What did he say? Emily hesitated. He said you were obsessed with proving he did something. I laughed bitterly. Of course. He also said you're trying to destroy his reputation. I haven't contacted anyone except people who contacted me. I know. How do you know? Because I've seen what he's been saying. Where? She paused. He's been telling people you're angry and trying to get revenge. I leaned against my kitchen counter. That's the next step. What? He'll say I'm obsessed. Why? He'll say I'm obsessed. Why? Because if I start documenting what happened, he needs to turn the documentation into evidence that I'm unstable. Silence. Emily, I think you're right. I hated hearing her agree with me. Do you have anything else? Yes. What? He showed me a message you sent him. What message? The one where you told him you were scared about losing your job. I closed my eyes. When did he show you? After you were terminated. Why? He said it proved you were spiraling. I asked her to send me a screenshot of whatever she had. She did. It wasn't the message itself. It was a photo of Ryan's phone showing my message. The date was 2 days after I had been placed on leave. He had shown it to Emily after my career had already been damaged. That meant he was still collecting material after the damage was done. I asked Emily one question. Why did you stay with him? She was quiet. Because I thought he understood me. Do you still? No. Do you love him? Another pause. I don't know. Then why are you still together? Because I don't know how to leave. I almost told her that wasn't my problem. Instead, I said, it isn't my job to rescue you from a person you chose. I know. Then you need to figure it out. We ended the call. I didn't hear from her for another month. By then, my life had started stabilizing. I rented a smaller apartment closer to work. I joined a gym. I started sleeping normally. I stopped checking Ryan's social media. That last one was harder than I expected. I had spent years knowing what he was doing. Suddenly, I had no idea, and that was good. I was slowly learning that independence wasn't some dramatic declaration. It was not needing to know what someone else was doing. Then I received a letter from my old company. It was a standard employment verification request from my new employer. My stomach dropped when I saw the company name. I called Susan. She told me not to panic. This happens. What if they say something bad? Let your new employer handle the verification. Don't contact your old company. 2 days later, Tom called me. We're good. What do they say? Just dates and title? I exhaled. That's it? That's it. Okay. Why? No reason, he laughed. You look like someone just told you the building didn't burn down. I smiled. Something like that. The relief lasted exactly 12 hours. Then Jenna sent me another message. You need to see this. It was a screenshot of a group chat. I recognized some of the names immediately. It was a group of mutual friends. Ryan was in it. Someone had asked whether I was okay. Ryan responded, he's not. He's convinced everyone is against him. He's been contacting people trying to build a case against me. Another person asked, a case for what? Ryan replied, I don't know. He's obsessed. Then someone wrote, maybe give him space. Ryan answered, that's what I'm doing. I'm just worried he's going to do something stupid. I stared at the screen. There it was, the new narrative. I wasn't investigating. I was obsessed. I wasn't defending myself. I was building a case. I wasn't hurt. I was dangerous. The words weren't accidental. They were designed to make any future attempt I made to tell the truth look like further evidence against me. I sent the screenshot to Susan. She replied, do not respond publicly. So I didn't. Instead, I asked Jenna whether she was comfortable preserving the original conversation. She said yes. I told her not to alter anything. I wasn't going to turn her into a participant in my revenge. I needed people to remain witnesses, not soldiers. That distinction kept me grounded. A month later, I received a call from Tom. Can you come in early tomorrow? Sure. There's something I want to discuss. I arrived at 7:30. He closed the door. We got a call. I felt my chest tighten. From whom? A professional contact asking about you. What did they say? They claimed you had a history of inappropriate behavior with clients. I almost laughed. What exactly does that mean? They didn't provide details. Who was it? He hesitated. A broker named Ryan Mercer. Everything inside me went still. Tom watched my face. You know him? Yes. How? He was my best friend. Tom looked genuinely surprised. Was, not anymore. He said he was concerned about you. I can imagine. Tom studied me. Do you want to explain? I shook my head. Not yet. Why not? Because I don't want you to think I'm asking you to take sides. I'm not. Good. I pulled out my folder. I can show you documentation that contradicts some of what he said, but I'd rather you evaluate my work independently. Tom looked at the folder but didn't open it. That's fair. If you have specific allegations, ask me. If there's something I've done wrong, I want to know. He nodded. I'll do that. I walked back to my office and sat down. Ryan had crossed the line from social manipulation into direct professional interference. That changed things. I called Susan. He contacted my new employer. Did they tell you exactly what he said? Yes. Did they put anything in writing? No. Ask them to document the conversation internally. Don't ask them to send it to you if it contains confidential information. Just make sure there is a record that the call occurred. I did. Tom agreed. He told HR to note the call and the substance of the allegation. I didn't ask for a copy. I didn't need one yet. I had something more important, confirmation that Ryan was still doing it. But I also had a problem. If I accused him publicly now, he'd have an easy answer. He could say I was bitter. He could say I was angry about Emily. He could say I was harassing him. He could point to the group chat and claim I was obsessed. He could turn my reaction into proof of his accusation. So I did the hardest thing I'd done in months. I did nothing. I kept working. I kept documenting. I let him believe he was succeeding, and he did believe it. I learned that from Emily. She called me one evening and said, "He's convinced you're going to lose it. Good. He talks about you constantly. What does he say? That you're still stuck on me. Are you?" She was quiet. "No." "Then tell him that." "I have." "And he him that have." "I have, and he doesn't believe me." I shook my head. "That's because he needs to believe I'm obsessed with you." "Why?" "Because if I'm not, then his story doesn't make sense." "What story? That he rescued you from me?" She didn't answer. "Did he tell people that?" "Yes." "Exactly." I asked whether she had decided to leave him. She said she was considering it. I didn't ask anything else. Her choices weren't my responsibility. Mine were. Over the next several weeks, my career began recovering. Tom gave me responsibility for a larger project. I received positive feedback from a client. My new company offered me a small raise after my first quarter. I started to feel like myself again. But I wasn't the same person I'd been before. I trusted differently. I no longer assumed loyalty was permanent. I no longer believed knowing someone for 16 years meant they couldn't hurt me. Most importantly, I stopped confusing access with trust. Ryan had known everything about me because I had given him access to everything. He had mistaken that access for ownership. The next major break came from an unexpected place. My old supervisor, Michael, called me on a Sunday afternoon. "Hey, Matt. Got a minute?" "Sure. I owe you an apology." I sat down. "For what?" I should have asked more questions before I believed what I heard. My heart started beating faster. "What did you hear?" "That you were becoming difficult with clients." "Who told you?" "Ryan. I didn't speak," Michael continued. "He called me twice. First time was in June, second time was in August." "What did he say in June?" "That he was worried about you." "In August, that things had gotten worse." "Did he give examples?" "Yeah." "What examples?" "He mentioned the material order mistake from January." I gripped the edge of the table. "How would he know about that?" Michael laughed awkwardly. "He said you told him." "I did. He also mentioned that you had a tendency to get defensive when corrected." "Did he say anything about my breakup?" "Yes." "When?" "When the August call." "Before or after I was terminated?" "Before." I closed my eyes. "Did he say I was emotionally unstable?" "He said you were struggling." "Same thing." Michael sighed. "At the time, I thought he was trying to help." "I know." "He wasn't, was he?" I looked at the timeline on my screen. "No." Michael was quiet. "Matt, I'm sorry." "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I spoke to someone else." "Who?" "A former client." "What did they say?" "They said Ryan had contacted them too." I felt the pieces moving again. "About me?" "Yes." "When?" "Before your termination." "What did he tell them?" "That you were under pressure and that they should be careful about escalating issues with you." I wrote it down. Then Michael said something that made me stop. There was one detail I didn't understand until now. "What?" He kept saying, "Once Matt leaves, I'll make sure you have someone reliable to work with." I stared at the screen. "What?" "That's what he said." When? In August. I couldn't speak. Ryan wasn't just trying to make me look bad. He had been positioning himself as the person who could replace me professionally. That made no sense at first, because Ryan didn't work for my company. Then I remembered the networking events, the contractors, the clients, the insurance brokerage, the connections. He didn't need my exact job. He needed me removed from the circles where I had built credibility. Then he could step into those circles himself. The realization was so ugly that I didn't want to believe it. I asked Michael, did he ever ask for anything? Not directly. Did he offer a replacement? He mentioned someone. Who? Michael gave me a name. It was a contractor I knew. A contractor Ryan had introduced to my company 2 years earlier. I searched my old emails. There it was. Ryan had introduced us. At the time, I'd thanked him. I had told him he was good at networking. He'd laughed and said, I'm useful to have around. I stared at that email for a long time. Maybe he'd been joking. Maybe not. I couldn't know. I wasn't going to pretend I could read his mind. But I could document what people had actually told me. Michael agreed to write down his recollection while it was fresh. I didn't ask him to accuse Ryan of anything. I asked him to record the dates and words he remembered. He did. Susan reviewed it and told me it was useful but not enough by itself. You're building a pattern, she said. Keep building it. How long? As long as necessary. What if he keeps doing it? Then every new incident becomes part of the record. I nodded. That became my strategy. I wasn't going to chase Ryan. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to expose him on social media. I was going to let him talk. And he talked. He told one mutual friend that I was obsessed with Emily. He told another that I'd been fired because of anger issues. He told a professional contact that I couldn't handle criticism. He told Emily that I was trying to ruin his life. Every statement added another piece. Then came the setback. A lawyer representing Ryan contacted me. The letter accused me of harassing and defaming Ryan by contacting mutual acquaintances and making allegations about his conduct. I read it twice. I hadn't contacted anyone except people who had contacted me, and I had never publicly accused Ryan of anything. But Ryan had found a way to flip the situation. The letter demanded that I stop discussing private relationship matters with third parties and threatened legal action if I continued. I sent it to Susan. She called me that evening. Don't panic. I'm not. You are a little. Okay, maybe. Have you contacted Ryan directly? No. Have you posted anything? No. Have you sent anything to his employer? No. Have you sent anything to his employer? No. Good. Then don't. What do I do? Nothing. That's becoming my favorite answer. She laughed. Seriously, don't respond emotionally. Keep everything. The letter scared me anyway. For the first time, I wondered whether I had gone too far simply by trying to understand what happened. Maybe Ryan really could accuse me of harassment. Maybe the people I'd spoken to would stop helping me. Maybe I'd spent months rebuilding my life only to let revenge drag me backward. I considered deleting the entire timeline. I didn't. Instead, I went back to the beginning. I looked at every entry, every screenshot, every conversation, every date. I asked myself one question. If Ryan had done nothing wrong, would this evidence still make sense? The answer was yes for some entries and no for others. That distinction mattered. I removed assumptions. I deleted anything that depended entirely on someone else's speculation. I kept only what I could explain. The timeline became shorter, cleaner, stronger. I didn't need 50 accusations. I needed 10 facts that couldn't be explained away. Then I found the fact I had been looking for. It was in an old email chain from January. I had forgotten about it because it seemed insignificant at the time. Ryan had emailed me after a conversation about my career. He wrote, "You'd be better off if you got out before they decide you're the problem." I had replied, "What are you talking about?" He never answered. The email was dated January 29, 2 weeks after the private conversation about my work mistake, 4 months before he asked Daniel about my disciplinary history, 7 months before I lost my job. I stared at the message until I understood why it mattered. Ryan had already been talking about me leaving my company before the first documented rumor. He had already framed my departure as inevitable. And there was one more thing. The email had been sent from Ryan's personal account, but the message included a signature line he'd used for his insurance business. I searched the email metadata available to me. Nothing magical. No hidden location. No secret server. Just the date, sender, recipient, and original text. But the date was enough. I added it to the timeline. January 29, Ryan says I would be better off leaving my company before they decide I'm the problem. I sat back and whispered, "Why?" I didn't know, not yet. But now I knew the betrayal had started earlier than the affair, earlier than the rumors, earlier than the conversations with Daniel and Greg. It had started when I still thought Ryan was my closest friend. And then my phone buzzed. It was Emily. The message contained no greeting, just 6 words. "I know why he wanted you gone. I know why he wanted you gone." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then tapped it awake and read it again. I typed, "Why?" The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, disappeared, then came back. Finally, she wrote, "Because of the Franklin account." My stomach tightened. Franklin was the biggest commercial development account I'd managed before I was fired. It was worth millions to the company over several years, and my department had spent almost 2 years getting the client comfortable with us. I wrote, "What about it?" Emily answered, "Ryan wanted the contractor connection." I didn't understand. "What contractor?" "Harrison Development." I sat down. Harrison was the general contractor attached to the Franklin project. Ryan had introduced one of their executives to my company at a networking event. At the time, I had thought he'd done me a favor. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because he told me." "When?" "A few months ago." "Before we broke up?" "Yes." "Why would he tell you?" "Because he was angry. At me. At you. At your company. At everyone." I waited. What exactly did he say? Her response came slowly. "He said you were sitting on a relationship he had built. He said if you weren't there, other people would finally realize he was the one who had the connections." I put the phone down for a moment. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted Ryan's motive to be something smaller, uglier, but simpler. Jealousy, Emily, resentment, anything that fit inside the normal boundaries of human betrayal. This was different. It meant he'd looked at my career and seen an asset he believed should have been his. I picked the phone back up. "Did he ever say he wanted me fired?" "Not exactly." "What did he say?" "He said you needed to be moved out of the way." I closed my eyes. "When?" "Spring." "Before the affair?" "Yes." I asked her if she had anything in writing. She said she had messages from Ryan, but some were deleted. I told her not to recover anything through methods she wasn't supposed to use. "If you already have messages, preserve them. Don't go looking through his accounts." "I won't." "And Emily?" "Yeah?" "Don't send me anything that was obtained illegally." "I understand. I mean it." She paused. "I know." That conversation changed the direction of my investigation. Until then, I'd been trying to understand why Ryan had sabotaged me. Now, I had a possible motive that connected my personal life to my professional life. He hadn't simply wanted Emily. He wanted the social position I occupied. He wanted my connections. He wanted my credibility. And he'd known exactly which parts of my life to attack because I'd spent years handing him the blueprint. I called Susan. She listened to the information about Harrison Development and the Franklin account. "That gives you a possible motive," she said. "It doesn't prove conduct." "I know. Don't forget that." "I won't." "If you can establish that he contacted people connected to your work and made false statements about you, that's different." "What should I do?" "Keep documenting. And don't tell him what you know." I almost smiled. I wasn't planning to. "Good. Because right now, he thinks you're emotional and reactive." That's what he's been telling everyone. "Exactly. Don't help him." So I went quiet. For the next month, I did almost nothing that Ryan could see. I didn't answer mutual friends who sent me gossip. I didn't post vague messages online. I didn't comment on Emily's relationship. I didn't mention Ryan at work. If someone asked, I said, "We're not friends anymore," and I'd rather leave it there. That sentence became my shield. It was boring. It gave nobody anything to repeat, and it worked. People got tired of the story when one side stopped feeding it. Meanwhile, my career improved. The Franklin account came up indirectly when Tom assigned me to a new client. The client knew my former company and had heard about my termination. I didn't defend myself. I simply did the work. After 3 months, Tom promoted me to senior project manager. It wasn't a huge raise, but it mattered. More importantly, it gave me something I'd lost, professional confidence that wasn't dependent on my old company. I began rebuilding my network independently. Former clients who respected my work started calling. One sent me a message asking if I'd consider consulting on a project. Another invited me to a networking event. I went, even though the idea of networking made me uncomfortable after everything that had happened. At the event, I saw Ryan. He was standing near the bar with 3 people I knew from the construction industry. He saw me almost immediately. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. It was the same smile I'd known since high school. The smile that used to mean, I got you. Now it meant something else. He walked over. Matt, Ryan. He looked at me carefully. How are you? Good. Really? Yeah. He nodded. I've heard things. I'm sure you have. His smile tightened. I'm glad you're doing better. Me too. He lowered his voice. I don't want this to be weird. Then don't make it weird. He laughed softly. Still sarcastic, sometimes. Listen, I know you're angry. I'm not here to fight. Good. He looked around. People are talking. People always talk. I'm serious, so am I. He leaned closer. You need to let this go. That sentence almost made me laugh. Let what go? Everything. What everything? What everything? He hesitated. You know? No, I don't. Matt, Ryan. We looked at each other. For a moment, I saw the old friend again. The kid who had slept on my basement floor after his parents' divorce. The guy who drove 3 hours to help me move apartments. The person who sat beside me in a hospital waiting room when my father was sick. The person who knew what I hated, what I feared, what made me laugh. Then I remembered the screenshot. You should be careful what you say to people, he said. Why? Because you've already hurt yourself enough. There it was, a warning disguised as concern. I smiled. Thanks for the advice. I'm trying to help you. You always were. He stared at me. Something shifted in his expression. Are you recording this? No. Then why are you acting like this? Like what? Like you're waiting for me to say something. I shrugged. I'm not. You looked around again. You need to move on. I have. Then prove it. I didn't answer. He walked away. I stayed at the event another hour. I spoke to people. I exchanged business cards. I didn't mention Ryan once. When I got home, I wrote down what I remembered from the conversation while it was fresh. I didn't claim he'd threatened me. He hadn't. I wrote the exact words I could remember and marked the uncertain portions as uncertain. That was the rule I'd made for myself. No embellishment. No interpretation. Just facts. 2 weeks later, Jenna called me. Are you sitting down? Why? Because I have something. She sounded nervous. What? I found the messages I told you about. Which messages? The ones where Ryan talked about replacing you. My heart started beating faster. What do they say? I don't want to read them over the phone. Okay. Can I meet you? Yes. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. Jenna arrived carrying a folder. She sat down and pushed it toward me. I printed them. Where did these come from? My own messages. He sent them to me. I opened the folder. There were screenshots of text conversations between Jenna and Ryan. The first was from March. Ryan wrote, Matt's not built for what he's doing anymore. Jenna responded, What do you mean? Ryan said, He's overwhelmed. Then, 3 weeks later, he'll be out eventually. Jenna asked, Out of what? Ryan replied, His job, his relationship, everything. I looked up. Did you ask him what he meant? Yes. What did he say? He said I was overthinking it. I turned to the page. Another conversation. April. Ryan wrote, Once Matt isn't in the middle, things will be easier. Jenna replied, For who? Ryan answered, Everyone. Then May, I can get Harrison to work with me directly if Matt stops being the gatekeeper. My hands went cold. There it was. The motive wasn't speculation anymore. Ryan had explicitly connected my departure to the Harrison relationship. Jenna watched my face. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. Neither did I. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I believed him. So did I. She looked down. There are more. She pulled out another page. This one is from June. Ryan wrote, Matt thinks people are loyal to him because he knows them. They aren't. They're loyal to whoever makes their lives easier. Jenna responded, That's harsh. Ryan said, It's realistic. I read the message twice. It was disturbing, but it also explained something I'd never understood. Ryan didn't see relationships the way I did. I had thought friendship meant loyalty. He apparently saw relationships as leverage. People were useful or they weren't. Connections were assets. Trust was access. Even affection could be traded for position. I asked Jenna one question. Why did you keep these? Because I was starting to realize he was talking about everyone like they were pieces on a board. When did you stop trusting him? After he started doing it to me. I looked up. What did he do? She swallowed. He told people I was unstable. I felt something twist inside me. The same phrase, almost exactly. Did he try to get you fired? He called my boss. I stared at her. What? He said I was having personal problems and might become unreliable. Did your boss believe him? for a while. What happened? I showed my boss the messages. She gave me a tired smile. That's why I'm here. I looked down at the folder. For the first time, the pattern was larger than me. Ryan hadn't developed this behavior specifically to destroy me. He had been doing it to anyone who became inconvenient. I just happened to be the person closest to him. That was the midpoint twist I hadn't expected. The affair wasn't the beginning of his manipulation. It wasn't even the center. It was one piece of a broader pattern of controlling people by defining them before they could define themselves. He told people what someone was, then behaved as though that description had always been true. Jenna became unreliable. I became unstable. Emily became confused. Anyone who questioned him became difficult. Anyone who believed him became useful. I took the folder home and scanned everything into a secure folder. Not because I wanted to publish it, I wanted the originals preserved and the copies organized. I asked Jenna to keep her originals. I didn't want everything in my possession. I learned from Susan that evidence becomes more credible when you don't unnecessarily move it around. I also began thinking about what revenge actually meant. For months, I'd imagined exposing Ryan in some dramatic moment, standing in front of everyone and showing them what he'd done. But the more I learned, the less satisfying that seemed. He had spent years creating a narrative. If I destroyed him with one accusation, people could still call it revenge. They could still wonder whether I'd exaggerated. I wanted something different. I wanted the truth to become so ordinary and so well supported that nobody needed me to convince them. So I did something that felt almost backwards. I stopped talking about Ryan. I started talking about my work. I published nothing publicly. I didn't send anonymous emails. I didn't contact his employer. I simply became visible again as myself. I attended industry events. I helped younger project managers. I took on difficult assignments. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. I rebuilt relationships one at a time. 6 months after my termination, I was promoted again. That promotion mattered more than I expected, not because of the title, because I realized Ryan had been wrong about one thing. He thought my reputation belonged to him because he'd helped build it. He hadn't. He had only been standing beside me while I built it myself. The first person from my old company to admit something was wrong was Paul from HR. He called me unexpectedly. I wanted to check in. Okay, we've been reviewing some historical concerns. My pulse quickened. About me? Hardly. What did you find? He hesitated. I can't discuss internal matters. Then why call me? Because I think some of the information we received about you came from outside the normal channels. I didn't speak. I'm not asking you to do anything, he continued. I just wanted you to know that we're looking at it. Does that mean my termination is being reconsidered? I can't say. Okay. And Matt? Yeah? If you have documentation, don't send it to me personally. Send it through the appropriate channel. I understood what he meant. He wasn't asking me to accuse anyone. He was telling me there was finally a door. I called Susan. She helped me prepare a concise packet containing only documents relevant to the professional allegations. No personal revenge material. No gossip. No speculation. Just dated communications, witness statements, performance records, and evidence showing the sequence of events. We sent it through the formal process. Then I waited. Nothing happened for 3 weeks. Then my old company requested a meeting. I almost declined. Susan advised me to attend with counsel. We did. Karen was there. Paul was there. Another HR representative sat beside them. Karen looked uncomfortable. Matt, we're reviewing the circumstances surrounding your termination. Okay, Paul spoke. We've identified discrepancies between some of the information presented to management and information available in our internal records. What kind of discrepancies? Claims about client complaints that we cannot independently substantiate. My hands stayed flat on the table. Anything else? Some statements about your conduct were attributed to outside sources. Ryan? I asked. Nobody answered directly. Paul said, we're not going to identify individuals during this meeting. I nodded. Understood. Karen looked at me. We want to discuss whether you'd consider returning. I hadn't expected that. To the same position, a senior role. No. The answer came out before I had time to soften it. Karen blinked. May I ask why? Because I built my career somewhere else. Silence. I appreciate the offer, I continued, but I'm not interested in returning to an environment where decisions about my character were made without giving me the opportunity to respond. Paul nodded. That's fair. I stood. Is that all? There is one more thing, Karen said. We may need your cooperation with an internal review. I'll cooperate with factual questions. Thank you. I left the building feeling strangely calm. 6 months earlier, walking out with a cardboard box had felt like the end of my career. Walking back in and declining their offer felt like getting something back that Ryan had never actually taken. My independence. I didn't need the old job. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to tell me I had been right. I had already built something new. The next collapse happened socially. A mutual friend named Chris called me. I owe you an apology. I laughed softly. Apparently everyone does. I'm serious. What happened? Ryan told me you were trying to ruin him. I haven't contacted him. I know that now. How? Because he told me you'd been messaging people about him. I haven't. I asked him for proof. And he couldn't give me any. I smiled. That'll do it. Chris sighed. Then I asked why he'd been telling me things about you months before everything blew up. What did he say? He said he was trying to protect me. From me? Apparently. I shook my head. Did you believe him? I did. Why are you calling? Because I found out he told someone else I had a drinking problem. I stared at the floor. He did what? Same playbook. Chris laughed bitterly. He told people I was unreliable. Then he offered to help. That sentence captured Ryan better than anything else I'd heard. Create the problem. Offered to solve it. Become indispensable. I asked Chris if he'd be willing to document what he'd been told. He said yes. Then he asked, "Are you trying to take him down?" I thought about it. I'm trying to stop him from telling lies about me. Same thing. Maybe. He laughed. Fair enough. A week later, Emily finally left Ryan. She didn't come to me. She moved into an apartment with a friend. I found out through Jenna. I didn't contact her. 2 months later, Emily sent me a letter. An actual letter, not a text. I read it once and put it in a drawer. She apologized for the affair. She apologized for believing things Ryan had told her. She admitted she had repeated some of his claims to other people. She said she had been wrong. She didn't ask me to forgive her. That mattered. I eventually replied with a short letter. I told her I accepted the apology but couldn't rebuild the relationship. She said she understood. That was the last personal conversation we had. Ryan, however, didn't disappear. He escalated. The professional review at my old company had apparently reached people in his industry. One of his major clients asked him questions about several claims he'd made regarding my former company. Someone had begun comparing his statements with dates. He started losing invitations to networking events. A contractor who had worked closely with him stopped returning calls. Then Jenna told me something that made me realize the end was closer than I thought. He asked me whether you've been keeping records. What did you say? I said I didn't know. Good. He sounded scared. I looked at the timeline on my screen. He should be. What are you going to do? Nothing. 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 Not yet. Because I knew something Ryan didn't. I had never needed to prove every lie he'd told. I only needed to establish the pattern that made the biggest lies impossible to dismiss. The affair. The workplace sabotage. The personal manipulation. The professional interference. They were conducted by dates, people, and his own words. And there was one final piece I didn't have yet. The person who could connect Ryan directly to the false information that had reached my old company and the Franklin client. I had suspects, I had statements, I had a timeline, but I didn't have the bridge. Then, on a Tuesday morning in November, Tom walked into my office holding a folder. "We need to talk." I looked up. About what? He closed the door behind him. Ryan contacted one of our clients again. My stomach tightened. What did he say? He claimed you were using company relationships for personal gain. What? He said you were trying to take clients from your previous employer. I almost laughed. That's absurd. I know. How? Because the client asked me. He put the folder on my desk. And because they forwarded me the email, I opened it. The message was from Ryan's business account. It contained my name, my previous employer's name, and a claim that I had been pressuring former contacts to follow me. But the email included one detail that Ryan couldn't have known unless someone had given it to him. It mentioned a private conversation I'd had with Tom 2 months earlier about a client transition. Only 3 people had been present. Me, Tom, and an HR representative. Ryan had somehow learned about it. I looked at Tom. Do you know who gave him this? Not yet. Then we need to find out. Tom nodded. That's why I came to you. I looked back at the email. The wording was polished. Professional. Concerned. Almost generous. It didn't accuse me directly. It suggested concern. It implied risk. It left the reader to reach the conclusion Ryan wanted. I knew that language. I'd been living inside it for almost a year. I printed the email and added it to the timeline. Then I noticed the timestamp, 8:14 Amidiraunin, the day before Ryan had called me. Not about anything important. He'd simply said, "I hope you're doing okay." I hadn't answered. Now I understood why. He wanted to know whether I would react. He wanted to know whether I was still watching him. He wanted me emotional. He wanted me careless. Instead, I put the printed email into the folder and called Susan. She answered. I said, "I think we finally have the bridge." She asked what happened. I told her. When I finished, she said, "Then don't touch it yet." Why? Because if he doesn't know you have it, he may give you more. I looked at the timeline. You think he'll keep going? People who believe their own narrative rarely stop when it stops working. They usually explain the failure by blaming the person they're targeting. I thought about Ryan's entire strategy. He had always assumed I would eventually react. He had always assumed I needed to defend myself. He had always assumed that if he pushed hard enough, I'd lose control and prove him right. I realized then that the most damaging thing I could do to him wasn't to attack him. It was to become impossible to define. I kept working. I kept my mouth shut. I let the evidence accumulate. And 3 weeks later, Ryan made the mistake we'd been waiting for. He contacted my old supervisor again. This time he didn't ask about me. He asked whether the company was considering reinstating me. Michael told him no. Ryan said, "Good, because you have no idea what he's been doing." Michael asked, "What has he been doing?" Ryan answered, "He's building a case against me." Michael said, "What case?" Ryan paused. Then he said something that Michael wrote down immediately afterward. "He thinks I ruined his life." Michael asked, "Did you?" Ryan didn't answer. He changed the subject, but that wasn't the important part. The important part was what he said next. "If Matt ever shows you anything, remember that he had access to all those people because of me." Michael called me that night. He told me exactly what had been said. I wrote it down. Then I looked at the entire timeline. January, April, May, June, July, August, November. Every stage was there. The private information, the rumors, the affair, the diablos, the professional interference, the social manipulation, the continued campaign after I'd rebuilt my career. Ryan had never stopped. He had simply changed tactics. And now I knew something else. He wasn't afraid of me exposing the affair. He was afraid of me showing people how he had built the entire story. I closed the folder and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't call him. I didn't post anything. I didn't tell our friends. I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. It said, "You should stop before you make things worse." I didn't recognize the number. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to Susan. Then I put the phone down. For the first time, I wasn't wondering what Ryan would do next. I was waiting to see how far he would go before he finally trapped himself in his own story. I didn't have to wait long. The unknown number texted again the following afternoon, this time with a sentence that told me more than the sender probably realized. "You know what happened when you started digging last time." I read it twice. There was no name, no explanation, nothing I could directly prove came from Ryan. But there was one phrase that bothered me. Last time. I hadn't told anyone outside Susan about the fact that I'd started reconstructing the timeline. Ryan shouldn't have known that I was digging unless someone had told him, or unless he was assuming I was doing exactly what I was doing. Either way, I wasn't going to take the bait. I didn't respond. I didn't call the number. I saved the message and moved on with my day. That was becoming my answer to almost everything Ryan did. Preserve it, don't react, keep working. A week later, Susan called me. "I have an update. Good or bad?" "Potentially very good." She explained that my former company had completed its internal review. They had found that several concerns used in the decision to terminate me could not be substantiated. More importantly, there were records showing that some of the information had originated from people who had no legitimate role in evaluating my performance. They weren't naming Ryan publicly yet, but the company had enough to acknowledge that the process had been compromised. They offered me a settlement and a formal correction to my employment record. The amount wasn't life-changing, but it covered the financial damage I'd suffered during the transition and removed the language that had made future employment difficult. I accepted. I didn't want my old job back. I wanted the record corrected. 2 days later, my former supervisor Michael called me. They asked me to give a statement. About what? The calls. What did you say? Exactly what I remembered. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. I'm sorry it took me this long. You weren't the person who did it. I still believed him. So did I. That ended the conversation. I thought that was the end of the professional side of it. It wasn't. The correction from my old company began circulating quietly through the industry, not because anyone made a public announcement, but because people talk. The story shifted. For months, I'd been the unstable guy who had been fired after losing control under pressure. Now people started hearing that the allegations couldn't be substantiated and that outside information had influenced the decision. The narrative didn't reverse overnight. Some people still believed what they'd heard, but uncertainty had entered the room. And uncertainty was deadly to Ryan because his entire strategy depended on certainty. He needed people to believe his version before they ever heard mine. Once they started asking questions, his story became vulnerable. Then Emily called me. "I need to tell you something." "Okay, Ryan knows about the settlement. How?" "He asked me." "Why would he ask me?" "Why would he ask you?" "Because he thinks I gave you information." "Did you?" "Yes." I paused. "Emily, I appreciate you being honest. He thinks I betrayed him." "You did." She laughed sadly. "I know." "What did he say?" "He said you were manipulating me." "Of course." Then he started talking about you the way he used to, meaning he said you were obsessed, that you couldn't accept losing, that you were building a fake case because you couldn't handle being replaced. I leaned back in my chair. "Did you believe him?" "No." "Why?" "Why?" "Because I finally understood something." "What?" "He always needed someone else to be the problem." I didn't say anything. "When we were together," she continued, "if something went wrong, it was your fault. If his business had a bad month, it was someone else's fault. If a friend stopped calling, they were jealous. If I disagreed with him, I was confused. He never actually did anything wrong in his own story." I thought about that. That's exactly what he did to me. "I know." "Are you okay?" "Not really." "That's not something I can fix." "I know." We sat in silence through the phone. Then she said, "I'm sorry." "I know. I should have told you sooner." "Yes. I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good." She took a breath. "I just wanted you to know." "I do." We ended the call. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. There was a strange emptiness in finally hearing the person who had hurt you admit that the person who hurt you was also manipulating them. It didn't undo anything. It simply gave the pain a shape. The next major break came from Chris. He called me late one night and said, "You remember that story Ryan told everyone about the night you supposedly blew up at him?" "Yes." "It didn't happen the way he said." "What do you mean?" I was there. I sat up. "What? The night at the bar before you and Emily broke up. Ryan told people you got drunk and accused him of sleeping with her." "I remember that night. I wasn't drunk." "I know. What actually happened? You left early." "Why?" "Because Ryan told you Emily had been upset and wanted to go home." I remembered it immediately. That night had always bothered me because Emily had seemed distant and Ryan had insisted everything was fine. "What happened after I left?" I asked. Chris was quiet. "Ryan stayed." "With Emily?" "Yes." My stomach dropped. "How do you know?" "Because I saw them leave together." I couldn't speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I believed his story." "What story?" "He said you were being paranoid and had gotten jealous because Emily was talking to someone." I laughed once, without humor. "And you believed that?" "At the time." "Did they leave together?" "Yes." "When?" "Around midnight." I wrote down the date. It was 3 months before I discovered the affair. 3 months. I had thought the affair had started sometime later. Maybe it had been happening already. I asked Chris if he would write down what he remembered. He agreed. That statement became another piece of the timeline. Then came another. Jenna found an old message where Ryan had told her, "Matt is going to blow up eventually." The message was dated 2 weeks before the bar incident. That was important because it showed Ryan had already been preparing people to interpret my future behavior as unstable. He wasn't predicting my reaction. He was creating a framework for it. If I got angry, he'd been right. If I stayed calm, he could say I was hiding something. Either way, he controlled the interpretation. I understood then why the phrase emotionally unstable had spread so effectively. It hadn't started with my behavior. It had started with Ryan telling people to watch for it. I brought everything to Susan. She looked through the documentation and said, "You have enough now to tell a coherent story. What happens next? You decide." I don't want revenge that turns into a circus. Then don't create one. What would you do? I would give the people who need to know the information through the appropriate channels and let them make their own decisions. That's it? That's it. It sounded almost anticlimactic. But I understood. Real consequences didn't need dramatic music. They needed accurate information in the right hands. The first person I approached was the professional contact who had received Ryan's allegations about me. Tom had already documented the calls. We provided the relevant information through HR. The company reviewed it. Ryan's business relationship with that client ended, not because I demanded it, because the client decided and no longer trusted him. That was the first domino. Then Harrison Development began reviewing its own relationship with Ryan. Again, I wasn't involved in their decision, but the messages Jenna had preserved showed Ryan had been representing himself as the person who could get things done through relationships he hadn't actually controlled. When those people realized he'd been using their names in conversations about me, they distanced themselves. Ryan lost a major referral source. Then one of his longtime business partners called me. I almost didn't answer. Matt, yes. I don't know if you want to talk to me. Why are you calling? Because I think I owe you an apology. Okay. Ryan told me you were trying to sabotage our business. I wasn't. I know. How? He gave me a story that didn't match the dates. I smiled faintly. What dates? He said you were fired because of a client complaint. But I checked the timeline. You were already gone before the complaint he mentioned. I didn't respond. I asked him about it. The man continued. He got angry. What did he say? He said I was choosing your side. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Anyone who questioned him became an enemy. Did you keep your messages? I asked. Yes. Keep them. Don't alter anything. If someone needs them, they'll ask. That's what I'm doing. Good. He hesitated. Did you really know him that well? I looked around my apartment. I thought I did. I'm sorry. Me too. After that call, Ryan's professional circle began shrinking faster. But the most satisfying part wasn't watching him lose clients. It was watching people stop believing him. The social consequences were quieter. People stopped inviting him to group events. A friend told me he had been removed from a planning committee. Someone else said Ryan had become defensive whenever anyone mentioned my name. I didn't celebrate those things. I simply noted them. The man who had spent years telling everyone I couldn't handle pressure was now struggling to explain why so many independent people had stopped trusting him. Then he made his biggest mistake. He called me. I almost didn't answer. I eventually did. Hello? There was a pause. Matt. Ryan. His voice sounded different, less confident. Can we talk? About what? Everything. I'm listening. I know you've been talking to people. I haven't been talking about you publicly. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Jenna, Chris, Michael, Emily. He sounded frustrated. You're going around collecting statements. I didn't answer. Why? Because I wanted to understand what happened. You know what happened. I know what happened to me. I didn't do that to you. Then you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Silence. You think this is some kind of game? He asked. No, you've destroyed my business relationships. I haven't contacted your clients. People are saying things because of you. What things? That I lied. Did you? He went silent. I heard him breathe. You don't understand what happened. Then explain it. I cared about Emily. I know. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. You were never there for her. That's between you and her. She was unhappy. Then she should have talked to me. She did. I laughed softly. No, Ryan. She talked to you. He didn't answer. That's the difference. Another pause. You think you're better than me now? No. You think you're won? No. You think you've won? No. Then what do you want? I looked at the timeline on my desk. Nothing from you. That's bullshit. No. It's actually the first honest thing I've said to you in a long time. Then why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything to you. You're destroying everything. No. I said it calmly. You're finally being judged by information you don't control. He went quiet. I continued, that's different. You think those people will stay loyal to you? I don't need them to. You always needed people. I used to. He laughed bitterly. You really think you're different? I am. How? I looked at the folder. I don't need to convince anyone anymore. He hung up. I sat there for several minutes. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt something closer to grief. That voice had been part of my life for 16 years. It was strange hearing it reduced to a person I barely recognized. The final confrontation happened 3 weeks later, and it wasn't dramatic. There were no cameras, no crowd, no shouting. It took place in a conference room at the professional association where Ryan had built much of his network. A formal complaint had been filed by one of his former business partners regarding false representations and misuse of professional relationships. I was asked to provide information because some of the claims involved me. Susan came with me. Ryan arrived with his attorney. He looked at me when he walked in. For a second, his expression softened. Matt, I nodded. Ryan, you sat across from each other. The committee chair explained the process. They weren't deciding whether Ryan was a bad person. They were examining specific professional conduct. That distinction mattered. The first issue was whether Ryan had represented himself as having authority over relationships he didn't control. The messages from Jenna established that he had talked about getting Harrison to work with him after I was gone. His attorney argued that the statements were private speculation. Then the committee produced an email from Ryan to a Harrison executive that referenced my departure and suggested Ryan could facilitate a smoother transition. The date was 2 weeks before my termination. Ryan's attorney asked where the email came from. The executive provided it. Ryan said he couldn't remember. The chair asked, "Did you send this?" "I might have." "The email is from your account." "Yes." "Then did you send it?" He paused. "Yes." The next issue concerned statements made about my professional conduct. The committee had records from my old company showing that the allegations couldn't be substantiated. Then Michael provided his written recollection. Then the former client provided theirs. Ryan's attorney argued that he had only expressed concern. The chair asked, "Did you have direct knowledge of these alleged incidents?" Ryan said, "Some." "Which ones?" Hugh listed 2. Both were disproven by internal records. The chair asked, "Why did you tell third parties about them before raising them with the company?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. "I was trying to protect people." "From what?" "From Matt's behavior." "What behavior?" Ryan named the same accusation he'd used before. Emotional instability. The chair looked down at the documents. "Do you have clinical or professional evidence supporting that characterization?" "No." "Then why did you use it?" Ryan looked at me. "Because I knew him." The room went quiet. I almost smiled. That sentence explained everything. He thought knowing me gave him the right to define me. The committee continued. They asked about his relationship with Emily. I wasn't asked to describe the affair. It wasn't relevant to the professional complaint. But they asked whether Ryan had a personal conflict of interest when discussing my professional reputation. His attorney objected. The chair overruled him. Ryan said there was no conflict. Then the committee produced a message from Ryan to Jenna in which he wrote, "Once Matt is out, Emily will finally see what I can offer her." The room went completely silent. Ryan's attorney turned toward him. "Did you write that?" Ryan stared at the paper. "Yes." "When?" "When?" the chair asked. "I don't remember. The date is here." Ryan didn't answer. The committee didn't need anything else from the affair. The pattern was visible. Personal relationship, professional opportunity, reputation campaign, replacement strategy. The same people, the same timeline, the same language. Then came the final piece. A message from Ryan to one of his business contacts, dated after my termination, said, "He's going to try to come back. Don't let him." The contact had forwarded the message to the committee. Ryan's attorney tried to argue that it was an expression of opinion. The chair asked one question. "Why were you so concerned about Mr. Carter returning to a company you did not work for?" Ryan had no answer. He looked at me. I didn't say anything. That was the moment I realized he had lost. Not because someone had yelled at him, not because I had exposed him, because he had spent so long explaining other people's behavior that he had forgotten his own needed an explanation. The committee suspended his professional membership and referred several matters to the appropriate organizations for further review. His business partners ended their relationships with him. The Harrison connection disappeared. The networking opportunities dried up. His insurance business didn't collapse overnight, but it contracted. Clients left gradually. People stopped returning calls. The social circle he'd built around influence became smaller. The girlfriend he'd taken from me was gone. The career position he'd wanted was gone. The reputation he'd built through manipulation was gone. And I had not physically harmed him, threatened him, hacked him, exposed private information, or ruined him through some elaborate scheme. I had done something much simpler. I had stopped protecting him with my silence. Emily eventually moved to another city. She sent me one final message saying she hoped I was doing well. I wished her the same. I never asked whether she regretted choosing Ryan. I didn't need to know. Regret wasn't something I wanted from her. I wanted distance. Chris and Jenna remained friends with me, though the relationships changed. We weren't pretending nothing had happened. We talked about it occasionally, usually without Ryan's name. There was no clean restoration of the past. I didn't want one. The past had taught me what I needed to know. Michael and I stayed in touch professionally. My old company corrected my record, and I kept the settlement documents in a file I almost never opened. My new company promoted me again the following year. Tom became one of the people I trusted most professionally, not because he promised loyalty, but because he asked questions before making judgments. That difference mattered to me. I also became better at saying no. I stopped explaining every decision. I stopped trying to make everyone like me. I stopped assuming that being a good friend meant absorbing every problem someone handed me. And I learned that trust isn't supposed to mean giving someone unrestricted access to your life. It means believing they'll handle the access responsibly. Ryan had been given more access than anyone. He used it to build a weapon out of information I had shared freely. For a long time, I thought that meant I had been stupid. Eventually, I realized it meant I had been trusting. There was a difference. I didn't want to become Ryan just because Ryan had hurt me. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life measuring people by how useful they might become or wondering when they would betray me. So I started over in smaller ways. I joined a recreational softball league. I traveled alone. I learned to cook more than 3 meals. I went back to therapy, not because Ryan had convinced me I was unstable, but because losing someone I trusted for 16 years had changed me, and I wanted to understand that change instead of pretending it hadn't happened. I met someone new eventually. Her name was Claire. I told her about Ryan early, not every detail, but enough to explain why I sometimes needed more time before trusting someone. She didn't treat that as a flaw. She said, "That sounds reasonable." I remember being surprised by how simple it felt. No performance, no manipulation, no need to prove anything, just honesty. A year after the professional hearing, I received an email from an old mutual friend. Ryan had apparently tried to reconnect with some people. Most declined. One person told him directly that they no longer trusted him. Another said they didn't want to get involved. The email ended with, "He keeps asking why everyone turned against him." I read that line and deleted the message. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something quieter. Finality. Ryan had spent years telling everyone that people were turning against me. In the end, the people he had manipulated weren't choosing my side. They were simply choosing not to be manipulated anymore. That's a different kind of victory. I still think about the first message from my coworker, the one that started everything. "I thought you knew." At the time, I had hated that sentence. Now I understand why it stayed with me. I didn't know. I hadn't known about Emily. I hadn't known about Ryan's conversations with my coworkers. I hadn't known about the client calls. I hadn't known how early the plan had started. I hadn't known how many people had been given pieces of a story designed to make me doubt myself. But I know now that the most dangerous lie wasn't that I was unstable. It wasn't that I was difficult. It wasn't even that I was losing control. The most dangerous lie was the one I told myself for years, that because someone had loved me once, helped me once, stood beside me once, they couldn't eventually become the person who hurt me. People can change. Sometimes they reveal themselves. Sometimes they don't. You don't always get an explanation that makes the betrayal feel fair. What you can do is decide what happens after you learn the truth. I could have spent years trying to make Ryan suffer. Instead, I built a life he had no access to. I got my career back without asking him to give it back. I rebuilt my reputation without begging people to believe me. I stopped needing the friends who chose him. I stopped needing Emily to understand what she'd done. And eventually, I stopped needing Ryan to admit that he had been wrong. The final piece of evidence stayed in a folder in my desk for a long time. The old email where Ryan had written that I'd be better off leaving before they decide I'm the problem. I kept it because it reminded me of the person I had been when I received it. I had read it and assumed my friend was worried about me. I had thanked him. I had trusted him. Years later, I finally understood what he'd actually been doing. He wasn't predicting my fall. He was preparing the ground for it. And the thing he never anticipated was that once I stopped trusting him, I would finally start paying attention. He spent years building a story about who I was. In the end, all I had to do was let the truth tell its own story.